My name is Akasha. I live in the Caribbean, in Grenada. Grew up in Jamaica. And my transformative experience has to do with walking the Camino de Santiago. That was 2 years ago, 2016. And I went in the Camino because I had a still small voice that told me to go on a very long walk. And I happened to come across one of Libby Tilsdale's article and Transformative Pilgrimage Learning, where she described her experience. And I thought, the Camino, 500 miles, that's long enough. And so I ended up in France, in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, because I had questions. I had questions about myself, I had questions about my purpose, I had questions about God. And I felt I could walk my way into answers to those questions. In retrospect, I think that's what I was hoping. I didn't have that conscious thought, I would get to the answers, but it felt like the appropriate way to do that. So prior to walking the Camino, I battled between, living in this unseen world that felt very natural to me, consciousness, spirituality, and the world that was more concrete, sort of materialistic world, a world that was based in social identities, being a Jamaican, being an immigrant, being an outsider, being black, being short, all of these sort of social identities, which I felt held me captive for a while. So I think my soul wanted to escape the captivity. And so walking the Camino really allowed me to experience a sort of in-betweenness, a place where I can walk in between these two spaces, this unseen world that was more spiritual, more immaterial, and the concrete world. I didn't have to battle between the two anymore. So I traveled through this world as a border dweller, living between these two spaces. I like to think of myself as a Jamaican brother, border dwelling brother. And although I crossed over many geographic, religious, educational, socioeconomic borders, I never truly crossed over into any, or fully crossed over into any of these spaces. I always see myself dwelling inside the sort of spiritual borderlands, so to speak. Even as a young kid, I remember going into the woods and imagining that I was traveling different planets and different worlds. And it felt natural to me. So much so that when I was a kid again, when I was sort of called for meals or to get a bath or to do chores, I felt I was disappointed that I had to leave this world and to be in this sort of material space. And following the Camino, it feels a little bit more natural to walk this in-between space. I can enjoy the benefits of both worlds. The Camino, it really changed my life. So in many ways, it was both a physical journey and a sort of metaphorical junction where many of these social identities sort of, collided with the self. And the self in the sort of Jungian tradition, or even the Vedantist tradition, meaning, Atman, pure consciousness, the thing that is always present, is undying, it's never born. It's a sense of the most authentic way of experiencing even my selfhood, my true nature, your true nature. So coming into that interaction, that sort of junction, that collision even, left me emotionally, mentally a bit, because I felt crazy for a while, and even spiritually paralyzed for months, until I learned to accept the reality of this collision, accept the reality of this in-betweenness, where I could be with both, and, both this material world over here and this sort of spiritual world over here. And I'm still learning to walk in this in-between space. I'm still learning to walk in the borderlands. And it's been transformative, and so one of the questions I'm left with for certainly myself and my students, my colleagues, the world even, is what's the posture that we need to take to be a student to ourselves? The deepest sense of self, that self again that is pure, that knows that it wants the very best for us, the very best for me. How do we become a student of that self?